What I also really liked about Linda is her reminding herself I should pay more attention to actually I like what I find aesthetic and what kind of designer I want to be. Because there's nothing wrong with being a woman and appreciating colors or soft shapes or flowers. Doesn't need to be Nikes and sports cars and watches all the way because we have enough designers with this being their main aesthetic.
Absolutely. I ask my team to submit sort of like the visual inspiration that they notice each year in our design cycle, just to make sure that they are on the same page, basically, when we produce products. And I really appreciate that they do it. I think that, like, a lot of business people and whatnot, they could just be too intimidated. That said, it's like almost all golf clubs. And I'm just like...
Golf? I want to meet your team at some point.
Like, it's just boards of golf clubs, man. I don't know what to tell you. Okay, anyway. Back to Linda. I love that she has identified, like, what she cares about in design. And she's, like, aware that just sort of liking the things that come across your doorstep are, you'll get shuffled off in a direction that's maybe not authentic. The more people attach to that, right, the more people are going to be inspired by Linda's choices. It's super important. I think Monica said something similar when she's like, I want to post my work. I'm only looking at men's work. And what's to say, like, that mine isn't equally inspirational for somebody?
Yeah. And I really liked that, that introspection of what matters to me was also flipped around to look critically at what's around her and what's inspiring her. And knowing that that affects the whole ecosystem.
Yeah. Does anybody feel they could really do justice to describing the Yanko design article debacle?
I just remember reading through the comments. I mean, I don't think I was that surprised by the statistics themselves, like the post itself. And I knew that there would be nastiness, but looking through it was just so disgusting. I remember that. There was like a very visceral, like, well, this is horrible. Humans are garbage.
Yeah, because the stats were just very realistically like, here's the percentage of women that work in ID and things like that. But then the comments were more along the lines of like, well, that makes sense, or like women shouldn't be working in ID anyway, or like things like that, right? Yeah. You're right, not shocking. But like a little shocking that people would be so brazen about it. Like you think you would keep those very unwelcome opinions to your small-brained self.
Yeah, like it's free to not be an asshole.
Yeah, this is a message to everyone who's listening to us. This is free to not be an asshole.
We still owe an apology to the people of Ohio, though, for that one, since we were assholes.
True.
Hey everyone, we're the Seattle Women in Design team, and this is the Beyond Ray podcast. I'm here with my team Ginger and Margaret, and our very special guest Linda Bui. Margaret, will you please introduce Linda?
Yeah, and I should probably ask Linda for some help of hers in the introduction. So right now, Linda is an amazing 3D visualization artist at Logitech, but she used to start as industrial designer. And going into 3D visualization was a huge amount of their personal strength and work and ambition, and also like very special interest she took in it. Linda, anything else you would like to add about yourself?
Yeah, I definitely had a big stint in ID for a bit. I think I've been in the field for about 7 years now. I graduated from the University of Illinois at Chicago in 2015. So I have my bachelor's degree in ID there. And I worked at several consultancies since then. My last job before I made the big switch into 3D visualization was at a company that primarily designed everyday carry products. And so we can touch on things like that in addition to my visualization background.
After starting in ID and switching to 3D visualization, how did you decide to do that? And like, what steps did you take?
we'll backtrack a bit. So after I graduated college, honestly, I primarily doing some freelancing, being like this like in-house designer at some of these consultancies in Chicago, and also like in the greater Chicago area a bit too. Like I've always been this kind of person that always wanted to improve my skills. So, like not only in school, not only on the job, but also like in my own time. Like if you ask me what are my hobbies, I'll say I love to design, and I also like kind of feel awkward about it because I realize that a lot of people say things like, oh, I love to bake, or I like to go fishing or ride my bike. And I'm just like, I love doing design, but I still sleep, right? But anyway, I loved to sketch at that time after college. And I was a little strategic about my career. And I wanted to be really good at one particular skill. Because, like people, I think, tend to graduate from industrial design with like a generalist kind of skill set, like knowing a bit of research, a bit of sketching, a bit of ideation, CAD, all that. And I knew that what would probably help me get nicely qualified for a job, or people would like see me as like useful for the team, is if I was just like really, especially good at one skill set, like in addition to the other stuff, right? Just like have a great strain. And so I actually picked sketching because I've always been like naturally good at drawing and like communicating in 2D like that. And yeah, so did you all know about like challenges like Render Weekly on Instagram?
Yes.
Yeah, so that was getting big, and I did that a lot for a while, like whatever free time I had, like especially because I live in the suburbs for a bit, and if I had to work in the city, that meant I had to do like these like 1 hour commutes each way. Brought my iPad with me, practiced by sketching on the train, ended up doing what people would call like sketch renders, like hours on refining an image in like Procreate. And I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years of this that then like I got to my next job in working at Everyday Carry Products, and I was still sketching then. But I realized that, not only was I really good at it, but I hit a kind of plateau where like I knew ways that I could be better, but it would like go into the realm of concept art, honestly, like in the kind of exploration I could be doing, or the higher quality of like realistic depiction that you could be doing in Procreate or Photoshop, right? And I was like, around that time, like I knew that I could keep going with this. But then like COVID hit, right? Like in 2020. Honestly, like I got laid off. And I think I was at this job for around like 6 months before the company decided to downsize their team, their ID team, from like, it was really just like the three of us, but down to like their main industrial designer. And, it got laid off. And there's like two paths forward from that, right? I think like what I would have done maybe at any other time in my life was just like go back on Indeed, on LinkedIn, and like search really hard and try really hard to apply for new positions, right? Like get a new job ASAP. But I was already like several years into my career at this point, and I thought, I really want my next job to be at a place where I do want to be at for, a year or 2 years, several years, like as long as I can for a while, work on a great team, work on products that resonate with me. And it wasn't a midlife crisis, but, like I took this opportunity to be like, I should really be intentful about what my next move will be. And, it's COVID. People are getting laid off left and right. And for like the first time, it's like okay to not have a job. Like, do you all remember when that time was like?
Yeah, a lot of baking bread and
Yeah.
I don't know, sitting around.
Crazy.
Yeah, right?
But then not having to have a job is true. I think people were really just a lot more honest about like what they wanted to be doing. The pressure from every corner was too high to be like faking it, right?
Yeah. Also, the idea of working remotely, yeah, like I just didn't really feel as much pressure because it's like, oh, well, I don't want to be back in the office anymore. Also, like there's this whole pandemic going on. And so like maybe it is a good time to take a break for a bit and like reevaluate what my goals are for myself going forward. So that was like April or May. Then on Instagram too, there was a new community called like Render Weekly. I think they had been around for a while, but to be honest, like my rendering, so I've always been interested in rendering, but even by 2020, I still had like a dinky MacBook 13-inch from that I got from 2011. Like, can you believe? Okay, so I swapped out I think it was like 4 gigs RAM. I swapped it out. I upgraded the SATA to SSD thing, all that. Like I could not do any more upgrades. And Keyshot is still like, if you want to render a 10-second animation, it took me like 2 days. Oh God. So yeah, so that's like the perfect example of when like your tools can actually limit your potential, or
Right.
even like career opportunities maybe. Anyway, during my time of brief freedom, I discovered a Discord called Minor Details. I forgot how I discovered them, but they were a big avenue for me to socialize with other industrial designers. Yeah, they were all active. There were so many kinds, like independent designers working in corporate or working in consultancies, students too. So big shout out to Minor Details. And that's where I met and still have like a lot of my friendships in design, like till today. And like this environment was really impactful for me. There's like a channel where people share their work. Honestly, like at that time, like so many designers were working from home, or maybe like some of them were laid off too. And so this Discord was popping. People were sharing work all of the time. And I really vibe with that kind of community, like people that openly share their work, whether it's like final or in progress, they're not sure, looking for feedback. And people were sharing work that they were submitting to Render Weekly too. And so that really inspired me. Like rendering was definitely something that I wanted to get better at. And I remember how I discovered this actually. My coworker at that last job had introduced me to it. So I was like already, thankfully, before I was away from that job, like started learning how to render. And so after I didn't have that job anymore, it was a matter of just like continuing and like going full on to what I was passionate about. Then in July, I think, because I realized that rendering was something that I wanted to get better at, like product visualization, like art direction, telling a product story. Also, like that's definitely a skill set that is really like in demand too. And I also had the financial resources to buy my first PC. And I think I did that in July, right before the GPU prices shot up and became very unattainable because people were buying GPUs to do things like Bitcoin. So I built my first PC, and the idea of building a PC was always kind of scary, right? Like there's like a lot of moments where if you don't do something right and like your computer doesn't turn on and then you don't know why, right?
Who was helping you with all of that? Like, did you have a lot of help of friends who were like around you in Chicago, or did you like pivot to talk more on Discord and get this support? Yeah, you can build your own PC from the internet. Or did someone just shook you in Chicago physically and say, hey, you can go do this. This is the path. We support it.
No, you know what? I didn't have a lot of like, maybe you'd say like active connections in Chicago at the time. Like I had a friend, but he was busy. But yeah, most of my communication with other designers was done through Instagram or Discord. And there's some designers there that were working together towards building their PC. So that's how like I learned so much tricks and tips. I also had Tim help me with building a PC too.
That's so cool. So yeah, you're sort of explaining the starting steps. You're like aware of Render Weekly and you're doing that and you're creating this digital community. When did you pivot into starting to gain confidence to share your work online and also to really lean into that as, an identity you were going to take on?
So sharing my work online has always been something that I've done, not really as passionately as I do today. Over a decade ago, DeviantArt was definitely a big thing. And then LiveJournal and Zanga. So I was a part of those communities lightly. There's this website called conceptart.org. I don't think it's around anymore, but the idea of sharing your art was always there, always a very common thing for me. But I was always freaked out. What if people think I suck? Or I think when I started being more proactive about sharing was really just after college. Before you graduate, it was just me and my cohort. And so I'm just sharing what I'm up to once in a while, and then I'll see you at class. But then after college, it's I didn't really have a familiar design community anymore to be around. I feel like everyone went their separate ways. And so for my personal motivation too, I felt inspired to post my work more on social media, mainly just Instagram. And it helped too that there were these active design communities too that are helping each other improve their skills.
And how did you pick the subject of work that you would like to be posting? Did you plan how to do a cycle, an exploration around something? Did you already think about finding the next job? Or was it just whatever random topic that feel good to render and experiment with?
So I mainly wanted to improve on my ideation skills. And so what Weekly Design Challenge helped a lot is that every week or every 2 weeks, they gave a prompt. 1 week would be about baby bottles. And so you can do it however you want. And then 1 week could be about footwear. And how I approached these prompts was, for example, with the baby bottles one, I wanted to do form exploration while also keeping in mind how these bottles would be injection molded, And then for something like silverware, there's silverware was even a week. Silverware was an interesting one because a lot of the entries for silverware sketches were obviously very minimal types of silverware. You can tell that they were designed by an industrial designer. And I just know that silverware can be very stylistic and beautiful, having maybe frivolous touches. And so for that sketching challenge, I leaned into designing something that was more beautiful or more extra than some industrial designers might approach it.
Do you think that approach to the challenges informed more of your aesthetic choices for 3D visualization or the hard skills of 3D visualization, or maybe a bit of both?
So with 3D visualization, how I got to, I'll backtrack a bit. I think what makes my work uniquely me is because I try to think about my work through a really honest lens. I try to communicate my design intent in a way that resonates with me genuinely. And, I say that because a lot of my work on my portfolio is personal work, things that it's not a client approached me to do, but I proactively started on my own. Does anyone remember when there was that explosive Yonko design post and all of the comments that happened from it?
About women in design, right? Women in
Yeah.
ID? Yes,
it was
definitely.
about the women in design statistics.
Yeah, people were freaking out about that.
Yeah, that kind of made me a little reflective on myself. I realized that a lot of people and work that I'm inspired by are guys, right? My closest friends were and are guys. And in school, the male designers were spoken about Naoto Fukusawa and Rolex Brothers and all that. I can't remember, we did have female faculty designer, but, guys were celebrated more. And then on Pinterest, I followed a lot of male designers. Another thing was that I realized that I was often inspired by things that a lot of designers are inspired by. So it's kind of like a validation that I'm doing something right, you know?
Yeah.
Sometimes even, you know, like you follow a designer on Pinterest and then they save something. And even if I don't like it immediately from a gut level, I like think about it more because I'm like, well, they like it. So I can find something to like about this. And then I did find something. That post made me rethink about how I was interpreting design. Like, what does it mean for design to be good? You know, what is inspirational to me? I realized that if I'm saving footwear images, I'm saving sneakers. But when I go shopping for myself, I love to buy flats and heels. You know, like at that time, I was not buying sneakers for myself, really. But when I think about like, oh, what footwear to be inspired in my work, Nike, Adidas, and all that.
Right.
So that sparked maybe like roughly a year-long exercise in how I perceived things, you know, and how I use them as inspiration in my work. When like I have to do a medical design project, for example, and I'm building my mood board of inspiration imagery, I look at like other products, right? Like seamless lines in headphones or light color palettes, but it's always like product focused types of inspiration. And one thing that I learned from my partner, Tim, is that you can definitely be inspired by things outside of product, right? And I also knew that like trends influence each other. Like there's trends in automotive and there's trends in interior design and then fashion design and the music and all that. And they like impact each other. I try to look at inspiration more broadly than just products and like taking different things about that into my own mood boards. And so like over time of being like more intentful about how I see inspiration, but also like if I see a photo or a design or whatever and I like it, I like think about it. Why do I like it? And sometimes like I don't really have a reason. I think it maybe is more of a feeling type of liking something. And so I bank it anyway, I say, but and sometimes I see something and I don't like it. And I think about why don't I like it? And, you know, you learn more about yourself in that way. I've also been like getting into curating things more. Like instead of Pinterest, I use this platform called Save. I like add to it, follow more people, or if things don't work out, I unfollow them. On Tumblr, I follow blogs. If it doesn't work out anymore, I unfollow it. Same with my Instagram. And so I'm like starting to see having like these avenues for inspiration as a thing that's always evolving with me as I evolve. That's a really self-reflective and like honest approach to thinking about what makes you you in design. I wish that something like that was taught more in school, although I think, you know, it's hard because with school you have a lot of students to teach. So it's more of like a one or two size fits all approach. But I think I feel glad that it's kind of weird to be thankful that I was laid off, but I'm honestly like quite thankful that I was laid off from that job because when I was hired into that position, one of the intents was that I would help find opportunities in the space for designing these products for women because it was honestly quite lacking. If these companies considered designing for women, they would basically take these main products that were designed for men and like pink them and shrink them and add some bling to it.
Pink, shrink, and bling.
Yeah.
I like the bling addition to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Pink it and shrink it like Katie Mach talked to us on the event 2 years ago, and soon we will bring her here to talk more about that.
It's so common. Yeah. I like what you're saying a lot about being feminine sometimes, right? Like that's more authentic to you and it feels realistic. I was also just curious, can you define everyday carry products in case anybody listening doesn't like have an immediate image of what that means to them?
Everyday carry products is a category of essential products that people will carry in their day-to-day. So it could be things like even a pen or a wallet or even like security devices like pepper spray too. I honestly didn't even know that this category existed before that job. And so it kind of says something, right, about how it's not really designed for women users.
Do you think it even needs, like, I'm thinking about a lot of those objects and I'm like, of course it shouldn't just be designed for men, but it's almost an odd request to design a version for women. Like, we don't need a women's pen, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
We need the one that was in Legally Blonde with the fluff on top.
I also think it's interesting, the category of products, because like it's really common to say a folding knife is an everyday carry, and I look at a lot of those products too, but I would never admit I need to carry this every day. I think they're kind of cool, but I think a lot of them are designed in a bit of a frivolous way. They're sort of showy and statusy, as opposed to the branding and verbiage around them is that you need this to like survive outside or even in the urban setting.
Yeah, it's like robust and aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, survive in the city jungle.
Oh, man.
So actually, what did you come up with in terms of how that industry would be expanded or more appealing to women?
Yeah, the unfortunate thing was that some of the stuff that I started working on then didn't make it towards the final round of production, or even like I think one or two things got to manufacturing, but then outside of that, it didn't survive the opinion of leadership. So and so, yeah, like honestly, missed opportunity, because as a female designer, I could have had an impact on that kind of category, but I didn't really have that opportunity. Then I didn't have this job anymore due to COVID. And that experience in general really inspired me to not only like rethink about what kinds of jobs I want to be at in the future, but also like it made me feel more confident in the kind of unique and feminine perspective I have. Like I think there's some teams where like they like to say that they really care about the female user and that they listen to their female users' opinions and design for them, but then like they don't have women on the team.
Of course. Yeah.
like quite honestly, they don't, right? Or I've been in situations where I am the woman in this room, but then no one asks for my feedback. And I'm just like, or like maybe like who they ask for feedback from is like their wives.
Yeah.
So, these are hot takes. That's what I think.
Do you think that the job you ultimately pick gives more equal opportunities to people from different backgrounds, like women or minorities, thanks to the fact that you don't need to go to office and it's like geography is not such an obstacle as in the job where you have to show up quite regularly?
At least with visualization, it seems like people really just care about the work and the portfolio. And so who you are or where you're from only matters if it's like a legality kind of like, like work issue thing. And also time zones. But I've worked with someone in a completely other country. And so I think, at least in Viz, it really feels like the idea of working remotely is more okay. Although, I don't know, like how is remote working for where you all work at in industrial design?
I only go in like once a week. So it's pretty remote.
I have to go often, but I get food. So.
I go a couple times. I think there's a little bit of pressure to go more because I work with almost exclusively engineers and they are there like every day because we have a bunch of testing equipment and stuff that they use. But yeah, I don't know. For the most part, I'm going in just to kind of be a team player and less because I feel like there's a lot of reasons I need to be there. Mm-hmm. So it's mixed. Week to week changes a little bit.
Yeah, so my whole team is totally remote.
Wow. Do you miss having more, human connection, or do you feel like you can get it well online?
I feel like thanks to how things happen with COVID, like I can find ways to keep myself mentally stimulated in that way, like with socialization. And my team, like we're pretty small, but we're close enough that we can have a lot of like pretty engaging creative conversations. I think I do miss the office, although it's kind of like I got so used to, like the benefits of working at home. For example, I don't go to work with makeup on, and if I went in person, oh yeah, I'd probably put makeup on for myself because it's fun. But like, it's just, I can actually focus on working and I don't have to think about how other people maybe might think of me like, oh, she doesn't have makeup on today, so she looks kind of tired. No, well, I mean, they don't even know. They just like think I look tired. I know that I don't have makeup, and then they think that I'm tired.
I definitely feel like working from home gave me a lot more space to work on, just like to care only about the dynamics that are productive. Like I don't think that you get distracted by just sort of like random workplace dynamics or drama. And it was really just helpful to be able to like, just have the types of conversations or reach out to people that were going to give critique or were like going to be good friends in a project, that kind of selectiveness that you get autonomy over is nice, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Would you still say that there's an aspect of equity to 3D visualization? Because earlier you mentioned building a computer and that you were really limited by your equipment. Do you think that that's a big hurdle for a lot of people that want to enter that industry?
Yeah, I think it is. Even with my familiarity with using computers for, a good portion of my life, I'm like not confident. Like I'm not confident in like making a mistake building a PC and then like having to deal with that financially. Like I would not be confident about that. Like actually when building my PC, this is getting a little nerdy, but you have to connect your CPU. But then I forgot what I did, but I accidentally bent some of the pins on on this PCU, and they're like 1 millimeter pins, right? And I was just like, oh God, when it powers up, it's just gonna glitch, right? But thankfully, I could just bend it back, and then it still stayed intact. I think my first PC build, I put in maybe $2,500 into it. I think people can get a pretty good rendering computer with just $1,500. I only like added more to it because I was future-proofing it a bit, like knowing that I will probably put in more GPUs into my computer in the future, and I want to keep it open for that. But yeah, and then like with equity in my 3D viz work though. So that's kind of an interesting topic because that's definitely not something people talk about, Like when it comes to visualization work, it's like you get the product and then you have to make the product storytelling around it, the art direction, create something that's really compelling to the user and that they would really resonate with. But then like things like diversity, that's not really something that I have been in discussions with, although I know like some people, they have been in meetings where they would have to consider those things, right? It's all about marketing. Like recently, I've had to make a image of a office, and like it was a really simple intent. It was like just make an image of an office, and then there's going to be people in here in a meeting. Then like, the client had like specific kinds of products they wanted in here. And this was more like a internal kind of ask. It's not like a marketing ask. And so because of that, I had like freedom with how I wanted this image to be. So I had like access to, I think around like 50 3D models, and a lot of women, a lot of men, some children, even dog were in it. The first thing you have to consider is looking for the models to accomplish your task. So it's like people in a meeting, they're sitting at a desk. And so you need to find the models of people sitting. And so then like the extra credit consideration that I had for myself was that I want women to be in this meeting. I don't want it to be all men. And so like I put women in this meeting, but I also wanted to represent different ethnicities, right? Like there was even a model of like a woman wearing a hijab too. And so that was kind of an interesting thing for me because I was like, the kind of client that the company would be presenting this image to, would they, first of all, like be turned off by how like this image is like full of women in a meeting, Because like there were men that I could have used, but like say some models would be like of a guy pointing, and I like that. That's like a thing that people do. But sometimes I think about it like, if I were one of these models, how would I feel in this circumstance, right? So like someone pointing at you, but you don't know the context behind it, maybe it could be received as a bit of aggression, There was also a model of like a much older, like old white man sitting, and he's not even like doing much anyway. He just has laptop. But I didn't really want to create this common scenario of an old white man in leadership in a meeting with like two minority women,
Right.
We have a lot of awareness to like what are the common depicted situations in offices. And I think especially when AI, like I saw an earlier designer, Leah Stewart, she made some AI generated imagery of like people in office meetings. And it was like, I think she received like images of men or like a lot of like whiteness in these groups. And yeah, because that's the pool of images they're pulling from, is that it's a lot of like these things. And so in the image I made, like I had all of these considerations because I guess like for my own interests, I want to try to negate some of that commonality. And maybe the other people that are viewing this image might be turned off by how there's women in the meeting or how there's one person wearing hijab, like you don't know how other people will feel from their own perspectives. But I knew that the client that I was creating this image for, they were all about diversity and inclusion, and like these values I share with them too. And so that's also what helped me feel more free to consider things like that in my work, especially like professionally.
It's really amazing in your line of work how much control you get to create a narrative that you want, right? You're sort of telling a story that you really would like to see in the world and challenging people to run into it and sort of have a reaction maybe and then question that reaction. It brings up a topic about ethics in the visualizations. As people that are doing like very traditional ID roles, I think we run into like some frustration with making physical waste. And that's sort of our downside. But for you, it's like, how do you balance how realistic things are versus how much reality you're trying to share? So in this scenario you talked about, that makes a lot of sense. You're just changing the type of people that would be in a meeting, and that's not very misleading. But obviously, we also have examples like creating such perfect visuals of like women's faces that then young people are trying to like emulate that in their real life. Can you speak to the ethics that you feel you have to consider when you're making really idealistic visuals?
Yeah, I haven't been in the circumstance where I have to work with human models in that kind of like fidelity. So there's this artist I follow on Instagram actually, and her name is Janice Sung, and she's an illustrator. And one thing that I really enjoy about her work is that she honestly just straight up draws women, but they all have like obviously different skin tones, different body types, different facial features. Like she doesn't just stick to hourglass figures, for example. Like she knows that like even in that area, there's different variation. I think it's very easy to consider things like different eye sizes or lip sizes or like how the face is shaped, but like small other considerations, like even how the body is or even how broad the shoulders are. Like I think that personally speaks to me. And so I think if I had to work on visualization like that, those are the things I would want to consider. I like perfection, but if I accidentally draw one eye bigger than the other, I think like now I would actually be fine with it, because in reality, there's a lot of like, I guess like unevenness like that, right? I know that in like when I was a lot younger, I'd always want both of my eyes to be even. I want them to be twins, but now I'm fine with them being sisters.
Oh, that's such a cute phrase. Wow, I love that.
Yeah. Ginger, was it you that had this context about how in Korea there's like a big thing like digital twin or digital influencer and people wanting to achieve that kind of perfection?
Oh, it was my comment. Yeah. I read about it like recently, how companies, especially in Asia, realized that it is much cheaper to create an influencer than to actually hire.
Wow.
Because like if you create one, it's they're always young. They never do anything controversial. They never have acne. They never have like a suspicious boyfriend. They can go and advertise everything. And like the thing is people follow it and people are like listening to their concerts, buying their singles, buying products from them. They even like sometimes talk to them as AI, as I read, but these people don't exist. They are like fully virtual reality product, but they do the job much better than some human in terms of marketing. And it poses the question, what power 3D visualization have? Because people who are not designers, they often can't say difference between like beautifully rendered interior or like actual photograph of a room. And then you keep seeing these images and think like, oh, someone can afford all this, or someone can be that clean, or like this and that. And they don't even realize that it's not a picture of a very expensive house. No, it doesn't even exist. There is no one who kept it like that. And where can it take us? Is it always cool? Should we like, sometimes at some point there had to be like description if the model in the like Vogue was photoshopped. Should we start putting description, this is not a photo? Well, rendering, all it tries to do is to be as realistic as possible, even adding like fake dust and fake scratches and all of that.
Yeah, that's kind of funny.
It's beyond just like looking at somebody's social media life that's curated, right? Now we're making it possible to not even be human, like way beyond the average person's best attempt. Yeah,
it's a deep fake.
True.
I like deep fake. Like one concern I had about AI, like AI generated imagery, is that when I look for inspiration, I know what I'm looking at, but then if AI comes into the mix, I've like been picking up on images that this is an AI image, but like literally like over a year ago, I never had that thought cross my mind when I'm looking at like an image gallery, and so I don't know how I feel about that. I think I've always been kind of like about authenticity, but look, like now I'm in visualization and making like fake rooms, right? So, but I've like noticed that as I've been getting better at doing product visualization and just like having to recreate reality digitally all the time, I've picked up on a lot of like marketing imagery from other companies where I'm just like, oh, they rendered this entire office. A lot of companies are rendering their offices. I think that's obviously like a budget save, right? And like also like logistics, like they don't have to carry like 50 of their office chairs into this like building and then also like try to like fix it up in Photoshop and all that. It can just be a render. And I think that that's great. I also would love if people in hiring positions that are looking to, create a team of 3D artists and such, that they especially put more value into hiring diversely. Like it took me a long time, honestly, like for me to break away from what I knew about good design. Like in school, we're taught what good design is. And like now, what I thought was good design then is definitely like quite different from now. A lot of the products, like for example, the Tesla, like, it gets like worshipped and I'm just like, I don't really like it. And I think it's like really good if you're able to have a team, especially if they're like tasked with making things that people can't determine if they're like real or fake. It's good to have a team of like diverse people and perspectives so that like you make work that's like not, I guess, like a common denominator of something else, right?
How would you define good design now? I mean, it sounds like a variety of perspectives is important to you. And what else is sort of your like goalposts?
Good design to me is honestly just like intentful. And I think I realized my principles in design more fully when I designed like a patent tampon dispenser a while back. And
Thank God.
yeah, thank you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I saw it. I really like it.
Yeah, it's called Got You. So my portfolio is a bunch of these like Instagram competition entries. I even have a sketchbook section of my website that's actually a lot of things I did for our weekly design challenge, and then things that like got inspired outside of that. But there was this challenge on Render Weekly, and they collaborated with Miss T Chang, and the objective was to interview, like get to know the problems and concerns that a minority might have, and like design a solution for it. And I'm like, oh, I'm the minority. Like, what problems and concerns do I have? Being this female Asian. And one problem that I realized I never thought about, because like in college, sometimes you get the problem like redesign something that has never like seen the light of day in design, right? So one thing I never thought about designing is the patent tampon dispenser, and that is so ubiquitous.
Mm-hmm.
Like you see it in malls and companies and like varying states of brokenness even. I think they do have some modern updates, but definitely not to the level of like the next toaster redesign or the next cell phone redesign. And I'm just like, like what if I took this like passionate, energetic approach towards designing mobile phones, but put it on the tampon dispenser? And having that different framework for approaching a project like that really made me think more freely about what this product could be. Like down to things like considering trends, like gradients are a trend. As a millennial, I love sunsets, and and so like I like things like that, ice cream and all. Like I think about that when I consider the color palette for this, because the intent for redesigning this patent tampon dispenser is that, to begin with, this is like a product that's very there for women in like their dire times, and like when they really need, like it's their first day on their period, and they're like, oh no, I don't.
Something bad has happened. Yeah.
And like I can't just go to 7-Eleven because I'm at work, and it's very stressful. And so it sucks to like come across this product in the open and then like experience it's not working, or maybe it doesn't even have windows, and so you don't know if anything's like stocked, or you have to like put this coin into this like scary aluminum looking thing with sharp corners and all. And so, I was like, I can definitely make this more approachable. And I think when it comes to industrial design projects, wasn't really something that was easy for me to do on the side. I think when it comes to building a portfolio in Viz, doing that has been a lot easier than doing a portfolio for industrial design. When I had to think about making work for my ID portfolio, I was always like concerned with how other people would think about it. Or I think because you're always like engaged with people that have opinions or are like in charge of possibly giving you a job or not, And so the pressure was honestly real for me throughout the process of designing an ID project. Like with ideation, like you can go in any direction, and then like how do you decide? And then I think when I do my product visualization work, I still maintain what I did for my ID project. So like with my product viz work, I'm still like an industrial designer first, I think, with how I approach these projects. Because like when I designed that dispenser, I was researching a lot. Primarily like, why aren't they redesigned, or do the packaging, does it have to be in these cardboard boxes? Like, is it a safety thing? And I tried really hard to find the reasoning behind it. And I think I did it really, and I also like looked into how these products were packaged in other countries like Japan, and then like learning the reasoning behind that. Like I think pads used to come in more like capsuled kind of containers, like kind of like a pill, like with the foil. And I learned the reason behind that is that they were really, really particular about cleanliness. So, like I do still do research. Like at the end of the day, what my portfolio is as a product visualization artist is a bunch of pretty pictures. And they're all like a certain ratio, and they're very colorful. And people think that my work is good, whatever. And what is more important to me than that is that I know that all of the products and like images that I've crafted were done with intent, like all across the board, from how it was designed, from all of the like considerations, like with the dispenser, touching things in a public bathroom is gross, and yet like while sinks, like the faucets and the soap dispensers, they're all like automatic. You just put your hand under and you dispense it. Paper towels are automatic. Even the toilet paper holder gets redesigned.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, I think the patent tampon dispenser could be dispensed like that too, electronically. Like my habit from designing industrial designer is that I was always like doubtful, like someone's going to challenge me on something, right? I had to make sure I had all of my research covered, all of my decisions justified. And so I did the same thing with even in this. Like someone's going to be like, why did you design this project to be for patent tampons to be free in the economy? That can't be like that. Or someone's going to steal it. I'm just going to be like, well, soap and paper towels are free.
I think it's really interesting that that's a fully ID project, in my opinion. I mean, you're rendering it and it's beautiful, but you did research, like you said, and you thought through all of the problems. You made a new product that has different functionality than anything that exists. I mean, that's a full ID process.
I have a thought, because in the public settings where tampons are free, they are usually in little baskets. So if someone wanted to load up on tampons and steal them, it's much easier. It's much easier than standing in front of the dispenser and like waiting 10 seconds between.
Exactly.
I think it's wild that the current ones make you use a quarter. Like,
exactly.
Nobody even carries around a quarter anymore. Can you imagine you're having a disaster and you can see like a stack of tampons in front of you? You don't have a quarter, so you can't get one. Like, it's just asinine. Yeah.
Yeah, there was actually someone redesigned the dispenser, and it's like a smart kind of dispenser, and the products are meant to be free. And how you activate it is through your phone, your smartphone. You send a text to this machine, and then I think like you have to send it a code or something, and then you get a free product. But then I thought about like, what about people that don't have a phone or a data plan, or they're homeless or whatever? And so the nice thing actually about making this portfolio is that, like my intent was to ultimately get a position as a 3D artist of some sort. And that means that I'm free from like having to consider manufacturing constraints or like realistic budget, like royalty concerns and all. But I still thought about that. Like when I designed that dispenser, I had like a huge like 32-inch ruler somewhere, on my screen. And I have all of my fillets like done accordingly, like everything is intentful. It's like I was like prototyping in 3D, even though I knew that in the end, the people wouldn't know how big something is or how thick a piece of metal is or anything like that. I did it because I wanted to be sure that this was like manufacturally feasible and structurally feasible. I was also doubting if someone's going to be like, wait, there's something that wouldn't actually be structurally right about this product if it existed in the real world. And I'll be like, aha, I did think about that. So
yeah, I think it leads us to the next question, like what are the things from ID that you carried into current career, but also like what are the biggest surprises starting this new career? And do you have any regrets going that way?
My ID process, I definitely carried, although I don't really sketch physically as much anymore. I think the nice thing about 3D art is that, you have your end goal, which is like create like pretty pictures, right? And how you do it is up to you. And if that fits with your intent, right? Like I think that gave me a lot of freedom with, like I built my confidence over time as I was building this new portfolio. My confidence in myself, like what I knew looks good. So I don't have to really go through the endless amounts of like form exploration. I think because I did go through like phases of that kind of stuff. And so it's like, like the longer you're in your career, it's like you can like narrow down what kinds of forms or shapes would work for any given product. And like, especially like the kind of aesthetic you want to communicate anyway. So I do a lot of like ideation in 3D now. And I'm still thinking about the user. Like I've said a lot in this podcast about how I'm designing for myself a lot in my portfolio, but I always think about how other people will receive it, and it'll like resonate with like the right people that I would ideally target things to. Like I designed these floral soaps, and even though that project was mainly about getting better at material creation in Cinema 4D, I did think about things like people's considerations when they're buying soap. Some people, they just want to buy soap as a thing to clean themselves with. Then like anything is fine for them. But then if you're very fancy about your soap, you'll know that there's different like kinds of like sophisticated floral or musky scents, and like the composition of the soap could be like silky, or it could be something like exfoliating. Or some people are really intrigued by like innovations in skincare, and so they're experimenting with things like charcoal toothpaste or even like charcoal and soap. And I think like I find a lot of fun in that, honestly. Like with ID, you're really set to some restrictions and research restrictions and all that. But the nice thing about being in 3D Viz is that the world really feels like your oyster and how you want to take your projects. And, if you're doing it professionally, obviously that changes too, right? But still, like, I feel like definitely a much better confidence in myself and like my unique point of view in Viz than I did in ID. And I think that's like because of some of the circumstances I was in, where like I wasn't really part of teams that I could really like lead with my opinion, but also like there was just a lot of pressure in general. I feel like ID is a lot more competitive than visualization, maybe 3D art even.
Huh.
It also sounds like the things that are good about ID, that we like about ID, you can still use those in 3D Viz, and you can just choose to use them or not. And that freedom, that lack of pressure frees you up creatively, and then you don't really feel like you are missing these things, right? Because you can still do them.
Yeah. When I think about what I miss in ID, I guess I don't really miss much, because I try to use as much of my industrial design sensibilities as I can. In visualization, like when you have to create something like soap, how do you make people think it's something soapy, right? Other than make it look bubbly, like that's when your eye for how materials look and communicate come into play. Also metal, right? Like obviously it's easy to make like metal look different than plastic, look different from glass, but then like how do you communicate the weight of that material? And so, it comes down to structurally the sheet metal has to be this thickness is determined already. But then how do you make something look lightweight? Just like how it is in industrial design, like form language comes into play. But then in Viz, there's like different ways you can light an object to communicate aspects about it. So you can light it in a way that it focuses on certain things that you want to feature on the web page, maybe, or you can light it in a way where it can showcase the product in a very like sophisticated and elegant way, or you can light it in a way that makes it look lightweight and airy, or it could look like dramatic and heavy. I didn't really get a formal education in Viz, but I can look at work that's done by studios where like they might have animated a short where the product is made out of wood. But I would know that it's obviously a render because like they made the wood grain way too contrasted. And I only know that because of my years of working with wood in some way, or like having that formal training in ID to know what things to focus on.
Yeah, we talk again about like differentiating reality from rendering. Reminds me, one of my favorite hobbies used to be going through IKEA catalog and making guess if it was a picture or if it was a render.
That's the most ID activity.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's funny. I don't know. I have to push back on you saying that you think ID is more competitive. I mean, I obviously don't know the stats on getting jobs, but looking at your renders, I think that you just have gone into something that you're incredibly talented at. maybe it feels so natural for you that you think it's easy, because I wouldn't know where to start. I mean, the texture of this soap is like, I can feel it in my hand. It's so realistic.
Yeah, I definitely see what you mean. People have approached me from like an industrial design angle, like wondering if I'd be interested in being an industrial designer for their team. And part of me is still keeping myself open for like ID opportunities in the future. But I have like a different kind of confidence level, and I don't know if the way I'm succeeding in Viz could like translate in ID. I think because in ID, I still feel like a lot of pressure from how other people will think about my work. And with my Viz work, it feels really reassuring when I see a lot of 3D artists and they all have like cool jobs, nice jobs, and they're doing, or even if they don't have jobs, like they're learning and making work and posting it on social media and getting a lot of like celebration. And like all of these artists, they have like different styles, different ways they approach their work, different workflows. They do things in different softwares from each other. With industrial design, you can assume that they are probably doing things in like SolidWorks, Rhino, or Keyshot. But then like with 3D art, they could be doing things in Marvelous Designer or Blender or Houdini and whatnot. And they can do like abstract work or realistic work or like crazy character designs or like modeling birds. And I just feel like the world of possibilities is really broad in this side, and that like people are really accepting to whatever styles people use in their work, so long as it looks good and engaging.
If anything, it sounds like ID can take note from, that approach. Like, we should be more flexible about the way people get to an end product and communicate it, because this opens up the door for so many more ideas.
I think it's nice that you've kind of reflected on and see so much value in the different ways that people do stuff in Viz. And that kind of brings us to our last question, where we really like our guests to brag about themselves, about their uniqueness and what they bring to their industry, because we think that making the industry more diverse and more broad is going to just improve everything for everyone. And that means that designers have to bring their whole selves and their authentic selves. So in that vein, can you tell us what you think you're bringing that's the most unique, the most you to your work?
What I think makes me unique is that I fully embrace that I'm a female minority designer. And what that means is that I've even kind of checked myself on what I thought was resonating to me, because it was things that my peers were resonated by. And I used to be this kind of designer that really did shy away from even liking pink or wearing too much jewelry, because cool designers wear black, right? Or they're minimal, they're like subtle, modern, whatever. And I tried to be that, but I didn't do too much of looking inward or even being okay with how I love color. My wardrobe is full of color. And then you can also see that in my work. I really love color. And my value is that I am really confident in myself, but not to the point where I would disagree with someone, right? I'm really open to different perspectives and open to checking if I have any biases on a matter, and making sure that when I do something or when I'm engaging with other people or engaging with different work, that I'm seeing things maybe in my biased way, but also in how they're seeing things or in a more neutral way of seeing things. And I love collaborating with different designers. I think that I've been a lone wolf in a lot of ways with how I've developed my skill set, but along the way, I've always tried to find some sort of community to, engage in these creative matters with. Mm-hmm. And I built some friends along the way. No matter where I go, whether it's spending time with you all on this podcast or working at a job or going to a design event, I love to learn from people and make new friends along the way.
Oh,
yeah.
That's great. Funny you mentioned colors because I'm about to ask you which is your favorite.
Well, my favorite color today is purple.
Does it change every day?
Sometimes, because like whenever I get that question, like a color flashes in my mind, but then I'm like, oh, I don't really feel green today though.
So it's more like a color mood, and you have one at any given time?
Yes.
Which one has lasted the longest recently?
Oh, I think pink, honestly.
Nice.
Yeah, I really proactively tried to use pink more in my work.
Love it.
Because I wasn't like that before, You want to be like the guys, or like it's not cool to be so girly, or like because you're among so many guys, they're going to be weird if you're too girly in some way or not resonating with you. Anyways, I like pink. I have a pink keyboard, pink hair tie, and I'm about to get a pink mouse and pink all the way. My Zoom picture is pink too, so.
I love it.
Cute.
Thank you.
Well, Linda, thank you so much for coming and joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and it was wonderful to talk to you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It was fun to be in conversation and get to know everyone here too.
Absolutely, yeah. Where should people find you if they would like to look at your work or connect with you?
They can find me on my website at www.linda-bui.com. I'm also on Instagram, so it's _Linda Bui _. And you can also find me in November 2nd to 3rd at the IDSA ID Technique. We're doing a webinar where some designers have been invited to showcase their workflows and techniques in visualization. And so definitely would be a good experience to stop by and like learn some new tricks for your tool set.
Amazing. And I'm telling you guys, don't sleep on that soap texture. You need to go look at that. Okay, well, we're the Women in Design group, again, based out of Seattle, and you can find us at our Instagram, WID_Seattle.
Yay!
And finally, we have the website that I was hinting the previous episode. It's beyondraypodcast.com.
We just wanted to thank everyone again for listening. It's so important to us to spread these stories and hear from you guys that they're valuable to you. It can be difficult to be in the design industry, but we wanted to encourage you to stay and to offer your unique perspectives and skills that will make a difference for products and users.